Chapter 3 Kai's Secret. In the peaceful outskirts of YorkCloud, where the city's frenzy couldn't reach, a new day dawned. On the fringes of this floating metropolis, Kai's awakening was accompanied only by the soft light of artificial dawn and the silence enveloping his modest apartment. Far from the spotlight and bustle that characterized the city center, Kai lived in a world apart, an island of serenity in an ocean of quantum and neural connections. His room was a sanctuary of simplicity, functionality, and minimalist comfort, a counterpoint to the complexity of YorkCloud. The bare walls, painted a soft white, were adorned with holograms of serene landscapes and a shelf containing a carefully selected collection of old books. The furniture was basic and functional, consisting of a single bed, a small work desk, an ergonomic chair, and just an analog clock, whose hands marked the silent passing of time. Kai awoke slowly, his eyes opening to the simple ceiling, allowing himself a few moments of tranquility before starting the day. There was no rush in his movements as he got up, stretching calmly, his muscles waking for another day. Kai's morning was a ritual of silence and reflection. He headed to the small bathroom attached to his room, where he performed his morning tasks. While brushing his teeth, he looked at his reflection in the mirror. His face was that of an ordinary young man, but his eyes carried an unusual depth, a reflection of his uniqueness in a world where everyone was interconnected. Returning to his room, Kai dressed in simple clothes, chosen more for practicality than style. He prepared his breakfast in the small kitchen of the apartment, a space equally devoid of technological gadgets. The act of cooking, even something as simple as boiling water for tea and preparing toast, was a moment of connection with the physical world, a counterpoint to the digital life dominating YorkCloud. While eating, Kai looked out the window, contemplating the view of his part of the city. From there, he could see the lower and older buildings, structures that dated back to a time before the rise of floating cities. There was a melancholic beauty in this landscape, a reminder of a world that once was and now existed in the shadow of YorkCloud's grandeur. After breakfast, Kai sat for a moment, allowing himself some time for quietude. He picked up one of the books from his shelf, opening it randomly and reading a few pages. The printed words were a comfort to him, a connection to a past he never knew, but felt an inexplicable affinity for. Kai's apartment, with its atmosphere of calm and introspection, was a microcosm of his own existence. In a world where every thought, every emotion could be shared instantly through neural networks, he chose a path of isolation, not out of desire, but out of necessity. His inability to leave emotional traces on the network made him unique, but this uniqueness came with the price of solitude. Kai was born with a peculiarity that only became evident after his first attempts to connect with the echo web. He found that he was unable to share his feelings through the network or leave emotional echoes. This singularity made him a kind of ghost in the echo web, a silent observer in a vibrant world of emotional exchanges. Although this condition isolated him, it also gave him a unique perspective. He could navigate the network without being influenced or manipulated by others' emotions. However, this immunity came at the cost of deep solitude, as while others lived in a sea of shared emotional connections. Kai remained on the fringes, unable to touch or be touched by the ocean of feelings that defined the humanity around him. He became an observer in a world that valued interconnection above all, a paradoxical, silent witness in an era of unlimited emotional expression and sharing. Before leaving for work, Kai paused at the door, taking a deep breath. He knew that, out there in the vastness of YorkCloud, he would once again be confronted with the reality of his existence on the fringes of society. But for now, in this brief and silent moment, he allowed himself to feel the peace of being alone, not as an exile by his own will, but as a calm observer of a world he could see but never truly share. As Kai left the tranquility of his apartment, he ventured through the less bustling streets of YorkCloud. These areas were a refuge from the constant connectivity that dominated the metropolis, places where the hum of the neural network was a distant murmur, not a deafening roar. As he walked, Kai lost himself in thoughts, his mind wandering down introspective paths. The streets were lined with old buildings, whose worn facades told stories of a less technological past. Kai moved between shadows and light, observing the few passers-by who, like him, chose the terrestrial path over fast aerial transport. He saw people, few, but still connected to their devices, their eyes lost in distant realities. Kai felt like an observer from another world, able to see the wonder of human connection, but eternally excluded from it. His walk led him to reflect on his own existence. Why am I like this? He wondered. Why was I destined to live on the margins of such an interconnected world? These questions ran through his mind, echoes of a solitude he carried like a silent shadow. In a world where emotions were freely shared, Kai's inability to leave his own emotional traces on the neural network was both a mystery and a burden. Kai continued on his way, passing a small park where some children played. He stopped for a moment, watching them. Their laughter, so free and unencumbered, seemed to belong to a different universe from his own. The children were connected, but not yet fully absorbed into the neural network that defined adult society. There was a purity in their joy that Kai found both beautiful and painfully unattainable. Resuming his walk, Kai headed to his usual destination, a small cafe located on a quiet street. It was one of the few places where he felt relatively at ease, a space where the pressure of connectivity was less intense. The cafe was an old establishment, with rustic decor and a comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee permeating the air. As he entered, Kai was greeted with a nod from the waitress, a young woman named Lena, whose friendliness was as genuine as her attempts to interact with him. He chose a table in the corner, a place where he could observe without being the center of attention. Lena approached to take his order, a friendly smile on her lips. "Good morning, Kai. The usual?" she asked, her voice carrying a tone of familiarity. "Yes, thank you, Lena," replied Kai, returning a shy smile. While waiting for his coffee, Kai observed the other customers. There were couples sharing intimate moments, friends laughing together, people alone immersed in their personal devices. He wondered what it would be like to share an experience like that, to share an emotion. Lena returned with the coffee, placing it on the table with a graceful gesture. "You always seem so thoughtful, Kai. Is everything okay?" she asked, concern tinting her voice. Kai looked at her, pondering for a moment before responding. "I'm okay. Yes. I just have a lot of thoughts, I guess. Lena smiled, but there was a shadow of confusion in her eyes. Well, if you ever want to share those thoughts, she began, but stopped, perhaps realizing that the offer was more complicated than it seemed. Thank you, Lena. I appreciate that, said Kai, offering her a genuine yet reserved smile. After Lena walked away, Kai lost himself again in his thoughts. He savored his coffee, each sip a small anchor in the present world. In his mind, questions about his identity and purpose continued to swirl, a whirlwind of doubts and reflections audible only to him. The encounter in the cafe was a microcosm of his daily life. Moments of superficial interaction with others, but a deep internal disconnection. Kai finished his coffee in silence, paid the bill, and left the establishment, returning to the streets of YorkCloud. As he walked, Kai reflected on the day's interactions. He wondered if he would ever find a place where he truly belonged, or if his life would always be marked by this solitary melancholy, an enigma living on the margins of an interconnected society. After leaving the cafe, Kai decided to deviate from his usual path and head to a nearby public park. It was a verdant space amid YorkCloud's urban landscape, a haven of calm and nature in a city dominated by technology. The park was a vivid contrast to the bustling streets and gleaming skyscrapers, offering a moment of peace and introspection. Kai entered the park, feeling the soft grass under his feet. The place was filled with tall trees and colorful flowers, creating a serene environment that contrasted with the city's frenetic pace. People of all ages wandered the paths, some sitting on benches, others playing with children or walking their pets. He found a secluded bench and sat down, silently observing the park's visitors. Families shared laughter, couples strolled hand in hand, and groups of friends chatted animatedly. Everyone seemed so connected, so integrated into the web of human relationships that formed the fabric of YorkCloud's society. Kai lost himself in his thoughts, contemplating his own solitary existence. He longed in a secret and profound way to belong, to be part of that world of connections and relationships. Yet his unique condition kept him on the margins, always observing, but never truly participating. As he was absorbed in his thoughts, an unusual incident caught his attention. A woman, apparently in her 30s, sat on a nearby bench with an expression of confusion and frustration. She fiddled with her Echo Link, trying unsuccessfully to re-establish her connection to the network. Intrigued and moved by a rare opportunity for interaction, Kai approached. "Are you having trouble with the device?" he asked, his voice soft and cautious. The woman looked up, surprised to be approached. "Yes, it seems to have stopped working suddenly. I'm completely disconnected now, and it's such a strange feeling," she responded, her voice revealing a mix of anxiety and discomfort. "I can take a look if you like," offered Kai, although he knew his experience with such devices was limited. "I would really appreciate it," she said, handing him the device. Kai examined the device, but quickly realized that the problem was beyond his ability to repair. "I'm sorry, I don't think I can fix it. It seems to be an internal issue," he said, returning the device. The woman sighed, accepting the situation. Well, thanks for trying. It's funny. I'm so used to being always connected that I feel completely lost now. Kai nodded, understanding perfectly the feeling of disorientation she described, albeit for different reasons. I imagine it's quite a change. Living a moment without constant connection can be challenging. Don't you use one? She asked, curious, noticing the absence of a device on Kai. Actually, no. My condition prevents me from connecting like most people, Kai explained, hesitant to reveal too much about himself. The woman looked at him with new interest. That sounds lonely, she commented, a hint of empathy in her voice. It is, most of the time, admitted Kai, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability. There was a brief silence, during which both contemplated their own experiences of isolation, one forced by technology, the other by nature. My name is Elisa, said the woman, extending her hand. Kai, he replied, shaking her hand gently. They talked for some more time, sharing a rare moment of genuine human connection. Elisa spoke about her life in YorkCloud, her experiences, and how the sudden disconnection made her realize how much she depended on the neural network. Kai listened attentively, fascinated by the perspective of someone who lived immersed in a world he could only observe from the outside. He spoke a little about himself, keeping details to a minimum, but sharing enough for Elisa to understand his uniqueness. As the conversation progressed, Kai felt increasingly at ease. It was a new and pleasant feeling to be truly talking with someone without the barriers of his unique condition. Eventually, Elisa checked her device again, and with a click, it started working. She smiled, relieved, but also a bit reluctant to reconnect. Thanks for keeping me company, Kai. It was nice to have a real conversation with someone, she said sincerely. I enjoyed it too. I hope we can meet again, replied Kai, surprising himself with his own words. They said goodbye, and Elisa walked away, reconnecting with the neural network. Kai remained on the bench for some more time, reflecting on the unexpected encounter. That brief interlude had provided Kai a glimpse of a connection he rarely experienced. He wondered if there would be other moments like that, other opportunities to feel less isolated. Finally, Kai stood up and resumed his way to work. He felt a bit lighter, a little less on the margin. The conversation with Elisa had been a rare gift, a moment of mutual understanding in a world where he often felt invisible. Kai arrived at his workplace, a modest research laboratory located in a less bustling part of YorkCloud. The building contrasted with the futuristic structures that dominated the cityscape, boasting a more traditional architecture reminiscent of a pre-quantum era. Upon entering, Kai was greeted by the characteristic sound of laboratory equipment and the soft hum of conversations among his colleagues. He headed to his workstation, an organized and efficient area where he carried out his tasks with precision and dedication. Kai was a respected lab technician, known for his meticulousness and attention to detail. While his skills were valued, his reserved nature and inability to share with the city's neural network were constant sources of curiosity and, at times, misunderstanding among his colleagues. As Kai focused on an experiment, one of his colleagues, Thomas, approached. Thomas was a young and enthusiastic scientist, always eager to discuss new ideas and theories. Kai, have you seen the latest updates on neuroconnectivity? There are some fascinating findings about emotional transmission, Thomas commented, looking at Kai with a mix of admiration and bewilderment. Kai paused his work and turned to Thomas. No, I haven't seen it. You know, I don't follow much of that, he replied with a slight smile. Thomas laughed, shaking his head. Oh, right. I always forget that you're, well, different in that regard. How do you manage, Kai? Living without the connection that we all have? Kai pondered for a moment before answering. I don't know if it's a matter of managing. It's just the way things are for me. I've never known another reality. But don't you miss it? I mean, sharing feelings, experiences, being truly connected to others? Thomas pressed on, his curiosity clearly piqued. Kai looked at Thomas, his eyes reflecting a deep melancholy. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like, but I've also learned to appreciate my own company and find satisfaction in simple things. Thomas nodded, but his expression showed that he struggled to truly understand Kai's perspective. I think it would be hard for me to live like that, I mean. We're so used to being connected all the time. It's a different experience, for sure, said Kai, turning his attention back to the experiment in front of him. The rest of the workday passed with Kai immersed in his tasks. He moved through the lab with quiet efficiency, interacting with colleagues when necessary, but generally keeping to his own space. During lunch, Kai sat alone at a table in the lab's small cafeteria. He observed others around him, all animatedly sharing stories and experiences through their neural connections. There were laughs and expressions of surprise, a cacophony of shared emotions that Kai observed but did not participate in. Kai reflected on the day's interactions, pondering his unique position in the world. He wondered if he would always feel like an external observer, never fully integrated into the fabric of the society that surrounded him. After lunch, Kai returned to his work, lost in his own thoughts. He wondered what it would be like to share his personal experiences with someone, to express his emotions and thoughts in a way that others could truly understand. The day at the laboratory came to an end, and Kai prepared to leave. He said goodbye to his colleagues, who responded with friendly nods and smiles. Stepping out of the building, Kai took a deep breath, feeling the cool afternoon breeze on his face. Walking back home, Kai gazed at the sky beginning to darken, the stars starting to twinkle. He pondered whether, somewhere in that vast city, there might be others like him, individuals who, for one reason or another, found themselves on the fringes of the shared experience that defined humanity in his era. Kai knew that tomorrow would be another similar day, with its challenges and moments of reflection. But for now, he allowed himself to simply exist, a solitary enigma walking through the streets of a city filled with voices and emotions he could hear but never truly echo. While walking, Kai observed the people around him. Groups of friends laughed and chatted animatedly, sharing moments through their neural connections, while couples strolled hand in hand, immersed in private worlds created by their shared experiences. Each interaction, each shared laugh was a reminder of Kai's isolation, of his existence on the margins of a deeply interconnected society. Arriving at his apartment, Kai felt a sense of relief. Those simple walls were more than a dwelling. They were his sanctuary, a place where he could strip away the expectations and complexities of the outside world. He entered and closed the door behind him, leaving the city's cacophony behind. The apartment was silent, a silence Kai welcomed like an old friend. He headed to the small kitchen and prepared a simple meal, his movements automatic and meditative. As he ate, his mind wandered, reflecting on the day's interactions. Kai thought about his conversation with Thomas in the laboratory, about the curiosity and misunderstanding he saw in his colleague's eyes. He pondered what it was like to be on the other side, to be someone who could share their emotions and experiences so effortlessly. This ability to connect seemed like an invaluable gift, something Kai longed for, but knew he could never possess. After his meal, Kai sat by his bedroom window, looking out at the city. The lights of YorkCloud shone against the night sky, each one representing lives, stories, and connections from which he was eternally a distant observer. The city was a mosaic of possibilities, a labyrinth of paths and choices. But for Kai, these paths often seemed inaccessible. He reflected on his existence in this vibrant society, on what it meant to live in a world where emotional sharing was the norm, yet where he remained an outsider. Kai wondered if there was a place for someone like him, someone whose emotions were an isolated island in a sea of interconnection. The stars twinkled outside in the beauty of the night sky. Kai wondered about the other lives inhabiting that expansive city, about the stories untold, the voices unheard. Amid so many, he felt singular, a singularity not by choice, but by circumstance. The night progressed, and Kai remained at the window, lost in thought. He contemplated the lights, the muffled sounds of the city, the feeling of being so close, yet at the same time so distant from the life pulsating beyond the walls of his apartment. Eventually, Kai stood up, preparing for bed. He turned off the lights, plunging his room into darkness, a darkness that mirrored his own inner state. Lying down, he looked at the ceiling, letting the quietude of the night envelop him. The silence was a balm, an antidote to the complexities and challenges of his existence. In his refuge, Kai found momentary peace, a place where he could be simply himself, without the expectations and pressures of the outside world. And so, his mind still filled with thoughts and questions, he drifted into dreams. In them, he wandered through YorkCloud, a shadow among shadows, an enigma wrapped in the melancholy of a life lived on the margins of a connected society.